Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very high pedestal. This transformative experience has led me to create a podcast that is all things mental health. Would it benefit you to hear from mental health professionals and influencers? Would it also add value to your life to hear real life and authentic stories from people talking about their mental health, the issues they face, and how they actively combat them? If so, you came to the right place. I want to start by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. On this episode, I'm happy to introduce my guest, Dr. Clarence Lee Jr. This doctoral and MBA graduate is also a decorated war veteran. Dr. Lee served in the United States Air Force for 10 years with several assignments, with his last being a flight surgeon flying the T-38 and UT airframes at Beale Air Force Base, California. Dr. Lee is a Christian encourager, nationally celebrated author, international speaker, and also CEO of CMLEEJR Co, which is a personal development enterprise that conducts live training experiences on high performance and mental conditioning for professionals, teams, and organizations with students. Recently, Dr. Lee was even named Top 40 Under 40 by the Sacramento Business Journal and Drexel University. I could go on forever with this introduction, but I think it's time to introduce my guest, Dr. Clarence Lee Jr. Clarence, thanks for coming on my show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to be a part of this conversation.
I'm glad you came on, Clarence. Would you please introduce yourself to our listeners and share just a part of your story before we dive in and get going, but please also share your role relating to mental health.
Wow. Okay. So you heard a little bit of my bio, but I'll kind of fill in some of the gaps there. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and didn't really come from much growing up. And I had this kind of vision to want to become a doctor, and it deemed really difficult for me to become a physician. I ended up applying to medical school for 5 years, over 500 times, and finally kind of got the opportunity to practice medicine. But one of the kind of the core messages that I, when I talk to folks and I do these is that persistence has kind of been my main thing, which overlaps a lot with mental health. Obviously, keeping your mind in a mindset where you can continue to push forward toward your dreams. But yeah, just I started practicing medicine, and I realized there were some limitations in the exam room, depending on the type of practice you're in, the type of time you have with the patient, and I wanted to do more. And I realized that I could prescribe a medication to someone, but I could make them take it. And so, in medicine, we call it non-compliant. So you have a patient that is non-compliant with the treatment plan. And, I found myself asking more questions about, why weren't you able to stay on the treatment plan? And then you get a lot of life, and then you get a lot of mental health things that will come up in the conversation. And I wanted to go deeper, and I wanted to do more of that type of work. And so that's when I started doing a lot of the personal development and the mental conditioning work that I do now, working with entrepreneurs, students, and organizations on mindset, and just continue to encourage people to help them stay encouraged. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, Clarence, thanks for sharing that. I love the work you're doing, and I'm very, very grateful to have you on the show today to help spread your wisdom across my platform. But something I do on each episode is I share a mental health story of someone who is famous, because I want to let you, the listeners, know you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they are healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. Since I have a former athlete on the show today, I will share the story of a current athlete who has shown the courage to speak on the topic of mental health, and DeMar DeRozan. Here's a few highlights I jotted down during his story. And the basketball world was shocked when DeMar DeRozan spoke about his mental health less than 2 hours before the 2018 NBA All-Star game. He tweeted, quote, "This depression got the best of me." The Toronto Star ended up publishing a story talking about his struggles with anxiety and depression, along with how important it is to be addressing these mental health issues. He was quoted saying, "We're all human at the end of the day." I thought that quote was very powerful because it puts things into perspective that we are all in this together. He continued saying, quote, "It's not nothing I'm against or ashamed of. Now at my age, I understand how many people go through it. Even if it's just somebody can look at it like he goes through it and he's still out there being successful in doing this, I'm okay with that." This all-star leader also said he chose not to drink mainly because he's seen some of his peers and colleagues use substances to cope with these mental health issues instead of doing them in a more natural or healthy way. He said he's seen friends become drug addicts and some people drinking their life away. Clarence, what do you take away from that story or the public statements about mental health?
Oh my gosh, it's a great story. I think it has a lot of talking points, obviously. But I would I would definitely just want to just kind of highlight that, on the outside, you know, in our Instagram kind of posting the highlight world, um, it's very easy to present yourself one way and then be going through an inner kind of turmoil. And so, yeah, I just kind of applaud him for kind of putting it out there and being kind of a beacon, right now to shine some light on this. But no, he touched on so many things, and you see it in my practice of medicine, with alcoholism and drug addiction. You kind of see it in people not wanting to just disclose even to doctors, even on the medical side, not even wanting to disclose what they're really going through. But and I think it's a widespread stigma that needs to be relieved.
Absolutely. And, a lot of guys in the NBA, or I wouldn't say a lot, but more are coming out. Kevin Love has been doing his part as well. And it's great to have not only more awareness around mental health, but the destigmatizing of men speaking about their mental health.
Absolutely. I figured we'd get to this, but I
We
was
will.
um I when I'll tell you a quick story from my life.
Please.
I found myself depressed after my marriage. So I'll tell you really quickly. I my first marriage failed, and how I got into that marriage was, my girlfriend at the time. We got pregnant, and my father wasn't in my life growing up. And one of the things I told myself, and there's a lot of talking pieces of this, but one of the things I told myself when I was younger was that I would never be kind of a deadbeat dad. There was one thing I said I would never be, because my dad wasn't there. So I always kind of promised myself that I would always be with my kids. And I had gotten into medical school, and I tell this story a lot, but I got into medical school, and my girlfriend at the time was living in Texas, and I had to go to Philadelphia to start school. And then she calls, and when she found out she was pregnant, said, "Oh, we're pregnant. What do you want to do?" And for me, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, do I leave school? Do I go back? I have this opportunity to become a physician, but now I want to be there for my kid. What do I do?" And so we decided to get married. And long story short, 6 months into that, she left. I mean, it was her first pregnancy. She had never been away from her family. I wasn't at home any of the time. I was studying all the time in medical school. It was kind of one of those things. There's no way it was going to work, but we tried to make it work. But after she left, I came home to this note, and she said, "Oh, I can't do this anymore." And then I got divorce papers, in a couple of months after that. um, I have found myself in a position where I was living my worst nightmare. So kind of like the one thing I said I wasn't going to be, I have became. So now I am here across the country. Someone's pregnant with my baby. People are seeing my baby. They don't see the dad. The very thing I said I wouldn't do. And I was depressed for 6 months. It was hard for me to get out of bed. It was, I could
Right.
not, I could not, I could not explain in my head that it was okay for me to be out hanging out and smiling when I was going through this situation. You know, for some reason in my mind, I was like, this is not okay.
Right,
And
right,
so it took everything in me, man, to get up every morning. And I'm a Christian, so obviously I was, you know, my kind of way out was just connecting with the Bible. But you know, it took me 6 months, man, where I could before I could get up and go out and kind of tell myself that it was okay and I was going to bounce back from this. But you know, I think part of especially depression piece, and there's lots of other mental illness, especially with depression. Um, Many of it, lots of times, it's when we have built up something so big in our minds, and we put so much pressure on ourselves,
yep,
and when life doesn't necessarily go our way, it's very easy to slip into depression. But you know, it was one of the defining moments for me when it comes to mental resilience, for me to understand that, you know, I'm not my circumstance. You know, things happen, give myself some grace. But you know, but also to find people that were going to be okay and accept me with
right,
that
right,
story,
right.
you know, because the only story I was telling myself was that nobody was going to understand my story, because you know I was supposed to be the success and all this stuff. And now I found myself living my worst nightmare.
Well, I really appreciate your openness and sharing that story, because I don't know how many people can resonate and help. Well, that's a perfect segue to get into the main event here, Clarence. On each episode, my guest and I will go over this series of 6 questions to help people with our experiences and our stories. I will ask a series of 6 questions to each guest, which slightly varies depending on if the guest is speaking on their own or others' mental health. And today we get the combination of both. So you ready to go?
I'm ready to do it.
Well, great. So since you just had the courage to share that first story about your openness with your situation, maybe we'll look into the professional side of things, where many would agree that the more common or talked about types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and schizophrenia disorders. What areas do you come across in your practice the most?
I would definitely mood disorders are at the top, and depression would definitely be at the top. What I see and what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Please, let's talk about that. What situations are we coming across the most with your specific practice?
So I'm in the field of occupational medicine.
Okay.
So I deal with basically anything health related that has to deal with someone's employment. So this is a wide range. So this is everything from like a pre-employment physical to get a job at, like, I don't know, Walmart,
All
all
right.
the way to the bank teller that was just robbed and held up at gunpoint, and how do I help this individual work through that. So I see a wide range. But in my practice, what we have seen, and one thing that's been well documented in occupational medicine literature, is the connection with injury and depression. Um, you know, employment, and this is such an interesting conversation. So let me know if I'm going too long. But employment is how we spend a lot of our time, and there's so many people. A large portion of the population are not engaged in the workplace, and it ends up being not a good place for people to be, even though they're spending so much time there. They don't feel valued. They don't feel like
Right.
they're living their dream. You know, they feel like they're just being, you know, used and all these things. You know, they want to be off and all this stuff. I have seen me having just kind of the sensitivity to understanding the mental health side. Many times, a lot of the healing process takes place on the mental health side. It's not always just physical, you know, but it can present in a physical way, kind of psychosomatic way, for the presentation for what caused an injury or the complaint that the person has.
Absolutely. Well, I think between your dedication to your job and your personal experiences, all of the things, I'm sure you're a great resource, and they'd be happy to have more insight from you today. So when did you realize that a career relating to the mental health was the right career for you?
Um, I think I'd probably say after I had been practicing medicine for a few years, and there's a lot of sometimes people will see a disconnect between kind of mental health professionals and medicine.
Okay.
Sometimes there's this chiasm in our healthcare world where you have the mental side and you have the medicine side. But I trained actually, and I trained in surgery before I started doing occupational medicine. I trained in
Okay.
surgery, and surgery is probably like the most kind of straightforward, straight physical, straight kind of medicine way to practice. I mean, the patient is asleep most of the time you see them, you're operating on them, and the pre-op and post-op visits are really small. So you don't get to talk a lot with the patient. It's not a lot
Right.
about what's going on in their life. It's really about how my arm is broken and how it needs to be realigned, so I really got to see that I could be practicing medicine, but I really could miss getting to know my patient, depending on the type of practice. And so after a few years of that, I just realized I wanted to dive more into the person, and not just treat the condition. And the other thing I'll say is I realized really early that when a person had a purpose, that purpose ended up being able to drive them. They could overcome lots of things. They could push through many obstacles. They could stay focused in a very different way, opposed to someone that didn't have a purpose. And so even though I could prescribe someone a pill, and the reason I say is that people don't need a pill, they need a purpose. But
Right.
when I could prescribe a pill, I couldn't always get them to take the pill. But if I could connect the pill to a purpose, it was a little different. So, kind of after a few years of practicing medicine, I realized I wanted to dive more into the kind of the whole side, and not just the medical ailment that brought them in.
You seem like a very big people person, so I might know the answer to this question already, but which side of medicine did you enjoy most?
Yeah, definitely the people side. I mean, each patient has a story, and how we practice, and that's why I'm glad. I hope a lot of doctors end up hearing this as well on the medical side, because each patient has a story, but how we have kind of spun medicine is, hey, it's a 15-minute slot, 20-minute slot. I got to get the patients through. I got to give them
Right,
numbers,
right, right.
and you can miss the patient, you can miss the person that's there, and you could just really talk about the sore throat. So for me, it's I really enjoy connecting with my patients and with people.
Well, since you've had the ability to connect with these patients and you've seen both sides of medicine really, what advice can you give to our listeners today as what may be considered a potential, early sign or that they're developing a mental illness?
So I'll focus more for my story, with
Please.
dealing with depression, and the top thing is, there's a few stories, but the top story was, that I developing this mindset that nobody understood me, nobody understood what I was going through, nobody had been through it, nobody would understand. That was kind of the beginning of a downward spiral into depression for me, because when I had convinced myself that nobody would understand, then that completely took off talking about it off the table. Because if the truth that I believed was that no one would understand, then why would I even talk about it? And
Yeah.
then the next piece was isolation. So, you start hearing rhetoric in your brain, or you start describing things to yourself when no one understands me. I'm the only one that's going through this. One, that's just not true. People there, the world has been here thousands of years. There's so many people that have been through similar things. The only difference, the only thing that separates them is that no one's talking about it. That's the only thing that makes you feel like you're different from everyone else. This person's going through it. You're going through it too, but no one's talking about it, so you don't know. So I would say kind of the first signs, especially dealing with depression, at least from my perspective, was that, hey, no one understands me. And then the next piece was isolation. So wanting to isolate yourself, being by yourself a lot. And we're built to live in community. Even though we have social media and all these things, and people are saying, oh my gosh, nobody's getting together, and we got coronavirus, now we can't get together. Seriously, we can't get together. But isolation is another piece that kind of can exacerbate another aspect of your life that can make depression symptoms worse. So those are kind of the two things I would say is kind of leading that way.
Well, I love how you bring up the community idea. People are meant to connect. We're supposed to have an interaction. And I think that can honestly alleviate a lot of pain associated with mental illness.
Absolutely, and facilitate healing as well. I mean,
Right.
I know when I was able to open up my idea that, hey, there was, other guys had been through this. Then I started to seek out that, and then my healing kind of began when I started to have those conversations with other gentlemen and kind of, quite frankly, normalizing. So even though we would say depression is not normal, quote unquote, but becoming normal, that being normal, right? That situation being normal was really when my healing began. So I think that the normalization of it, it was a big piece for me.
Well, I think you're doing a great job in helping normalize or at least create more awareness for all things associated with mental health. But if we could pick three, and only three, because I want the three most important things. What are the three most important things our listeners can do on a daily basis or short-term basis to improve their overall mental health?
I have to pick three, but goodness, I have so many. But I would say the one of the top things, or will be in my three, would be to do things that fill you up or that make you feel good, that make you excited. So I describe it as, if you're pouring into others, you have to be pouring into yourself. So in the pouring into yourself, there's doing those things you like to do. So for me, I'm a really active person. I like any sort of physical activity I love doing. So for me, I know that if I'm not moving my body, if I'm not going to surf, if I'm not riding a bike, if I'm not playing basketball every day, then my mood, I can see my mood will change if I don't have that pouring into myself. Because in my profession, I'm pouring out, all day. I'm taking everybody's story, and I'm dealing with everybody's issue. That's what I do. So you have to, number one, pour into yourself. The second thing I would say is encourage someone else, because when we're centrally focused, it's very easy for us to not acknowledge that other people are going through something because we're going through something, right? It's easy if we're just focusing on us. So I would say the second thing is, if you could encourage someone in your day, if you could, put yourself in someone else's shoes and try to encourage them to keep going, I think that would help mental health as well. And then the last piece is to share your story.
Yes.
Share your story. Every single day, I think you could find opportunities to share your story. And I say that for several reasons, but the most basic reason is it helps you connect with people. When people feel like you will share with them and you're not, everything is all awesome, stars align, my fairy tale life is great. As soon as they realize that you're real, they connect with you, and then the bond becomes deeper. So, and you can do that every single day. And so for me and what I do, that's kind of how I practice, how I approach, kind of fended off mental health things.
Well, I love it. Again, we keep coming back to a central theme, it seems, here with spreading your story, connecting with people, and all of the good, great, and positive things that can come from it.
Absolutely.
I love it. So then we'll look a little more long-term now here. Clarence, we've spoken about some great short-term initiatives to create a more positive mental headspace. What are two longer-term commitments our listeners can start to make to create a healthier mindset?
So, this is a really good question. I don't want to get too deep, but I would definitely say we all need to work to shift the overall stigma, especially in the USA, associated with mental illness. It's funny. I saw a movie that I thought was great. It's called The Silver Lining. Have you ever seen that movie?
I have not.
So it's a movie about a guy that he's bipolar. And I thought that it was a beautiful depiction of what the world could be when awareness was spread. So this person was bipolar, However, the community that he lived in was aware of his condition, understood his condition, and understood what was going on. So this individual ended up being protected from what, say, a person that didn't have a community that supported them. They wouldn't necessarily have had those opportunities to not go to jail when something was going on. People would understand. So I would say the first thing I would say is to be involved in initiatives that bring awareness long term for mental health, because a lot of our prison population, and I don't want to get off track, but it affects so many things. So
Right.
You're talking about a big topic. But a lot of our prison population struggle with mental illness. Mm-hmm. And I personally feel if our communities understood more, talked about it more, were more educated, we could recognize mental illness for mental illness opposed to criminal activity. So, I would say that those two, I would say making sure we're personally involved in long-term initiatives to shift the perspective. But then the second thing was, making sure that folks that are in public office understand the education piece of our public servants, people that are serving the community. We've got to be educated a little bit more on these conditions.
You couldn't be more right. Just the word mental health for so long was looked down upon, frowned upon, and with a little bit of education from those in the leadership realm of the society, it may not have been that way for as long as it has been. So
Very
that's,
true.
I think, part of our work that we're both trying to accomplish is making mental health more socially acceptable, because we have a physical health. And on an earlier episode of the show, someone brought up, we take care of our dental health, right? We make sure our teeth look all pretty, but we don't take 2 seconds to take care of our mental health, thing that runs the whole car, the whole body.
Exactly. And I think when
crazy. It's crazy when you think about it like that, man. It's just like, exactly. Come on.
When you put it that way, it makes so much sense.
It's just, the little things you can do, whether it's seeing a therapist or just talking to somebody like we're doing right now. We're sitting here talking right now, getting our mental health workout in for the day.
Absolutely.
So now that we're talking about a little awareness with that, you brought up, awareness. What are some ways that you plan on raising awareness for the importance of mental health in the future? Maybe you have some initiatives you're working on. Please share.
Yeah. So for me, I am in my events that I put on, I dive a huge piece into mental health because, and I have a few events that I do. I have one that's titled Impact, Purpose, and Destiny Experience. That's kind of like a smaller group where we deal with just life in general, making an impact, serving your purpose, and creating the type of destiny of the world that you want. And then the second conference is going to be my first one this year. Is going to be the Persist Conference. And kind of where I've taken a stance is that, life's you go up and down with life. There's a lot of ups and downs. And there's a lot of ups and downs in pursuing your vision, right? Pursuing a dream that you want. And so kind of what I've kind of taken on in teaching about mental resilience and persistence is to understand, hey, what do I need to do to allow myself to continue going forward to push for that grander vision that I have for my life and my family or the world? Because one of the biggest pains that I see in this area are individuals with so much potential, so much passion in the area that end up giving up on something too early. And this isn't just I want to be successful, I want to be rich. I mean, this is, hey, I want to change something about the world. This is, hey, I want to change how medicine is practiced, or hey, I want to change how this is done. So many passionate, capable, awesome ideas just get killed in the minds of people, and I think a lot of it is opposition, obviously, and a lot of it is obstacles that come up. So if I can introduce a process into someone's brain that allows them to see, obstacles for what it is, to see and to have that resilience when they're going after something big, I feel like we'll just have more people will be happy, number one, and then we'd have a better world, quite frankly. But
absolutely, man.
That's what I'm working on.
You're right. And, you seem like a guy who we may be making a difference together sometime after this podcast. Here we are. I'm on the East Coast over in Tampa. We have Clarence out there in California. I'm excited for a potential future with both of us because of our appreciation and willingness to make the mental health world a better one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we
Yes,
could definitely collaborate on something for sure.
We will.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, Clarence. I know our listeners will see all the value in your episode today. I truly love how you started the episode with having the openness to talk about your personal experience and then delving into your professional experiences, all the way that stemmed from starting in the military to doing your own practice to being a great father. So I love having you on the show today. So thank you again. But it's time for the last word here. I do this on my other podcast, What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur, too, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something that you would like to share with the listeners that we did not touch on much today?
Well, yeah, it's probably my family piece. And
Please.
I would just say that, I started off with a story about the marriage that failed and being a deadbeat dad. And let me tell you what, I continued to keep the vision. I prayed to God. I knew what I wanted. I always wanted a family. And, 5 years later, my wife came into my life. We've been married 8 years now. I have 5 children now.
Amazing.
I'm with them. I see them every day. I'm there when they wake up. I'm there for lunch. I'm there for dinner. So, that family is the core piece of everything that allows me to do everything that I do. And I identified with family very young in life, and I knew it was something I wanted to be passionate about and I wanted to do a great job at. And through persistence and continue to keep my vision and continue to believe it was possible for me, I was able to have a great family.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. My family, for me as well, is a very vital part of my life. I'm in contact with my family every single day, everybody in my family. Granted, I've learned through my accident that patience is a very big part of life. So as big a family played in my role, one day, who knows, for me too. I'm only 28. I have not found that special somebody yet, but there is plenty of time in life to worry about that. But Clarence, would you mind sharing your social media, your website, or ways for our listeners to follow all these endeavors, stay motivated and inspired by you?
Absolutely. So my main website is just ClarenceLeeJr.com. And then my social media handles are Dr. Clarence Lee Jr., pretty much everything. So at Dr. CLARENCELEEJR. So Dr. Clarence Lee Jr. So that's Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, all the places. Dr. Clarence Lee Jr.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Everybody listening, I'll be sure to check out all those handles and website for valuable content. Be sure to follow his wonderful, wonderful journey because I can't wait to see what's next from him. But also be able to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook at A Mental Health Break. And we're on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube. And my site is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now. But DM me or email me. I want to hear what you think. If you like today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.